The night in Bellevue was unusually still, a silence that seemed to settle over the cobbled streets like a heavy cloak. Hodge leaned against the cold stone wall of the alley, his breath shallow, watching the fog coil around the lamplight. He had been summoned to a place he did not know, by people he did not trust, and every step that had carried him here throbbed with doubt. In his hand he clutched the folded letter that had arrived without a seal, only his name scrawled in a hurried hand. The words were few but pressing. If you value the truth, come tonight. The city's fate may depend on it. He turned the parchment over for the 100th time, searching for some clue that might reveal whether it was a trap. He knew Bellevue's factions well. The merchants who dealt in shadow, the guildsmen who whispered of rebellion, the councilmen who cloaked treachery in velvet robes. Each could have reason to draw him out into the dark. His instincts told him that the meeting was dangerous, but his conscience had already driven him here. The corruption gnawed at Bellevue like rot beneath polished wood, and he could no longer ignore it. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention. A tall figure emerged from the mist, cloaked in a travel-stained mantle. As the man neared, Hodge saw that it was Thomas, the scholar who had become his uneasy ally. Thomas carried a satchel of documents against his chest, his eyes flicking warily across the shadows. "So you came," Thomas murmured. His voice was low but tinged with relief. "I should ask you the same," Hodge replied. "Do you know who sent this?" He held up the letter. Thomas shook his head. "No, but I know that Bellevue sits on a precipice. There are men who would see it fall for their own gain. If this summons offers us even a shred of truth, we must seize it." The words were spoken with conviction, yet Thomas's fingers tightened on his satchel as though it carried his very soul. Hodge noticed but did not press. Trust was a brittle thing between them, born not of friendship but of necessity. The meeting place lay within the ruins of St. Verena's, a church gutted by fire years earlier. Its charred beams jutted into the night sky like broken ribs, the stained glass long since shattered. They entered cautiously, their boots crunching over fragments of ash and stone. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though the fire had died a decade ago. Hodge's hand lingered near the hilt of his dagger, his body tense. From the shadows stepped a woman, her face half hidden beneath a hood. Her voice was calm but firm. "You should not have come openly. Eyes watch even in the dark." Thomas stiffened. "Who are you?" The woman did not answer at once. Instead, she drew a small lantern from beneath her cloak and set it upon a broken altar. Its flame revealed sharp features, eyes that glimmered with resolve, and scars that spoke of a life spent on the edge of survival. "My name is irrelevant," she said. "What matters is what I carry." She pulled from her satchel a packet of sealed letters bound with a frayed ribbon. The seal bore the crest of Bellevue's council. Hodge's heart thudded. "Where did you get those?" "They were taken," the woman replied, her tone cool. "At great risk, and they reveal what you both already suspect. The council is no council at all, but a nest of conspirators." Thomas stepped forward, his scholar's hunger overcoming caution. He reached for the documents, but the woman pulled them back. "Not so quickly. You must prove yourselves worthy. Knowledge is not given freely, it is earned." A chill wind stirred the ashes across the floor, scattering them like whispers. Hodge felt the weight of invisible eyes pressing on him. Was this woman alone? Or were others hidden among the ruins, bows drawn and waiting? The woman's gaze fixed on him. Bellevue rots from the inside. Merchants, guardsmen, councilmen, they are all woven into the same tapestry of betrayal. If you wish to fight it, you must understand the depth of the corruption. These letters are your key, but once you read them, you will no longer be free men. You will be hunted. Silence hung heavy in the ruined church. Hodge felt Thomas's eyes on him, waiting for his decision. The path forward was clear, yet it was lined with daggers. He thought of the city, its markets bustling by day, its taverns alive with laughter by night, and he knew how fragile it all was. If the conspiracy reached deeper than anyone suspected, then Bellevue's peace was already an illusion. He nodded slowly. "We will take them." The woman studied him for a moment, as though weighing his soul, then released the documents into his hands. "Then may God protect you," she said, extinguishing her lantern. Darkness swallowed her form, and when the wind passed through the ruins again, she was gone. Only the papers remained, heavy with secrets, heavier still with consequence. Dawn broke over Bellevue with deceptive calm. The city's rooftops glistened under the pale wash of early sunlight, but to Hodge and Thomas the brightness felt hollow. They had spent the night locked in a small attic room above a cooper's workshop, poring over the packet of letters stolen from the council. Each page crackled with revelations that painted Bellevue not as a city of order, but as a chessboard of hidden players. The documents revealed alliances between merchants and guardsmen, coded payments to councilmen, and references to a shadowed figure known only as the Benefactor. Every transaction was written with precision, yet cloaked in the language of trade and duty. To the casual eye, they were harmless accounts of city business. To Hodge and Thomas, they were proof of a network pulling Bellevue's strings. Thomas hunched over the table, eyes scanning line after line, lips moving silently as he pieced together connections. His scholar's mind sparked with urgency. "Look here," he whispered, tapping a passage. "These funds were supposedly for repairs to the Eastern Gate, yet the same amount is recorded as being paid to the Guild of Coin. The gate was never repaired." The money vanished into shadows. Hodge leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His instincts for danger, honed on battlefields and alleys alike, told him this was bigger than corruption. It was treachery on a scale that could collapse the city. "If this Benefactor commands the guilds and the guards, then Bellevue is already lost," he muttered. Before Thomas could answer, the creak of footsteps on the stair froze them both. Hodge reached for his dagger, eyes narrowing toward the door. A knock followed, 3 short raps, then silence. Hodge motioned for Thomas to stay quiet, then opened the door with blade in hand. A boy no older than 12 stood trembling, a folded parchment in his hands. His cheeks were smudged with soot, his clothes ragged. "Message," the boy stammered, thrusting the paper toward Hodge before scurrying down the stairs. Thomas unfolded the note, his brow furrowing. "They know," he whispered. The words were few but chilling. "Return what is not yours or be silenced." The warning was clear. Whoever controlled the council's secrets had eyes everywhere, and now those eyes had turned upon them. By mid-morning, Bellevue's marketplace was alive with its usual noise, merchants shouting prices, carts rattling over stones, children darting through crowds. But to Hodge and Thomas, the city now seemed layered with invisible watchers. Every glance lingered too long, every whisper carried weight. They moved cautiously, blending with the throng, keeping the packet hidden beneath Hodge's cloak. Thomas's nerves betrayed him. "We cannot simply walk about with this," he said, voice taut. "If they strike in the open, we are finished." "Then we keep moving," Hodge replied. "The more eyes, the safer we are. No knife strikes in the middle of the market." Yet even as he spoke, he doubted it. The conspirators had reach, and fear was their sharpest blade. At the edge of the square, a disturbance broke the flow of the crowd. Guards in crimson livery shoved people aside, their leader reading a proclamation aloud. "By order of the council, any who withhold stolen documents or consort with traitors shall be deemed enemies of Bellevue." The words struck like iron. Thomas's face drained of color. "They mean us," he whispered. Hodge gritted his teeth. The net was tightening faster than expected. "We need an ally," he said. "Someone not yet poisoned by their coin." Their search carried them to the quieter quarter of Bellevue, where stone buildings pressed close and tavern signs creaked in the wind. They entered the Stag's Horn, a tavern where Hodge had once dealt with men who walked between law and crime. Inside, the air smelled of ale and smoke. The murmur of voices muffled beneath low beams. At a back table sat Captain Elara Vane of the City Guard, a woman Hodge had trusted once. Long ago, when swords still spoke louder than bribes, she wore her armor without ceremony, the steel dulled by years of use, her dark hair tied back in a soldier's knot. Her gaze sharpened as they approached. "Hodge," she said, her tone a mixture of recognition and warning. "You choose dangerous company these days." "And you still wear the guard's colors," Hodge replied, sliding into the seat opposite. "Tell me, Elara, do you wear them for Bellevue or for its masters?" Her eyes narrowed. "Careful." Thomas set the sealed letters on the table, his scholar's hand trembling. "These prove the council's betrayal," he said. "But proof is nothing without allies." Elara studied the packet without touching it. The tavern's noise seemed to fade around them. After a long silence, she said, "If you are right, then the rot reaches deeper than even I feared. But words on parchment will not be enough. Blood has already been spilled and more will follow. You are asking me to choose between my oath and my survival." Hodge leaned forward, his voice low. "Choose Bellevue. If we do nothing, the city falls." For a moment, Elara's resolve wavered. Then she reached for the letters, sliding them into her gauntleted hand. "Very well. But once I take this step, there is no return. The council will brand us all traitors. The weight of her choice settled like iron in the air. They had gained an ally, but also painted targets on their backs. As they rose to leave, a commotion outside shattered the fragile moment. Shouts, the clash of steel, and the unmistakable cry of a city guard. The conspiracy had found them. The clash outside the Stag's Horn forced Hodge, Thomas, and Captain Elara into action. Steel rang on steel, the air filled with shouts and the tramp of boots. Hodge drew his blade instinctively, his muscles coiling like a wolf about to spring. Yet Elara's voice cut through the din. "Not here," she hissed. "The street is theirs already." She pushed them through a side passage, the tavern's walls groaning with age as they fled into a narrow alleyway thick with the stench of damp stone. Thomas stumbled, clutching the packet of documents now strapped beneath Elara's armor. His face was pale, his breath ragged. Behind them, voices barked commands. The conspirators' men were closing in. "Where?" Hodge demanded. Elara's jaw tightened. "There is one place they will not follow, not openly." The catacombs, the very word chilled Thomas. Beneath Belleview stretched a labyrinth of ancient burial vaults and forgotten tunnels, remnants of an older city buried by time. Few dared enter, for the darkness seemed to carry whispers of the dead. Yet for those hunted, it was sanctuary. They slipped into a grated entrance hidden behind a crumbling shrine. The iron groaned as Elara forced it open, the smell of earth and age rushing upward. With no choice they descended. The catacombs swallowed them whole. Torches sputtered weakly, their light devoured by endless corridors of stone. Carvings of saints long forgotten lined the walls, their faces eroded, their eyes hollow sockets staring into eternity. Thomas clutched his cloak tightly, his voice trembling. "It feels as though the very air watches us," Hodge grunted. Better dead eyes than living ones with knives, yet even he felt the weight pressing in. The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became, broken only by dripping water and the scrape of their boots. Every shadow seemed to move, every whisper of air carried menace. They found refuge in a chamber where stone coffins rested beneath faded murals of battles long past. Here, Elara allowed them to pause. She laid the letters upon a slab of stone, her expression grim. "This is no longer about corruption," she said. "The Benefactor holds sway over guards, guilds, even council. If we falter, Bellevue becomes his in all but name." Thomas rubbed weary eyes. "But how do we fight shadows? We cannot expose what people refuse to see." Hodge leaned against the wall, torchlight cutting across the scars of his face. "Then we find the Benefactor himself. Cut off the head, the body dies." Elara's eyes flickered. Easier said than done. "He is a phantom, a name whispered but never claimed." Silence stretched heavy until Thomas, ever the scholar, whispered, "Every phantom leaves a trace. In these letters, in the gaps of coin and command, we must follow the trail, no matter where it leads." Before more could be said, a sound stirred beyond the chamber. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Not the hurried chase of guards, but something heavier, ritualistic. Torches flared in the adjoining corridor, revealing hooded figures in black robes. Their faces were masked, their hands bearing chains and symbols of power. The conspirators had followed, and worse, they brought with them the cloaked priests of the Benefactor's cult. "Leave the letters," one intoned, his voice echoing unnaturally. "You trespass upon the silence of the dead." Elara's sword hissed free of its sheath. "We trespass upon no one, but you," her voice sharpened like steel, "you defile Bellevue with your shadow." The chamber erupted in violence. Chains lashed out, clanging against stone. Hodge surged forward, parrying with brutal efficiency, his blade flashing in dim torchlight. Elara fought with practiced discipline, each strike measured, her shield ringing with deflected blows. Thomas, untrained in battle, pressed against the wall, his mind racing. He clutched a torch, brandishing it to ward off one of the robed figures. The firelight revealed pale, fanatical eyes behind the mask, eyes that did not blink. The clash seemed endless, steel against chain, torchlight against darkness. Finally, with a furious strike, Hodge sent one of the cultists sprawling. The others fell back, their voices raised in some guttural chant. The air itself seemed to thicken, a low hum vibrating through the stones. Thomas gasped. "They are not retreating, they are summoning." Indeed, from the far wall of the chamber, a section of mural cracked, dust falling as if the very dead resisted disturbance. The cultists' chant grew louder, shadows twisted unnaturally. "Enough!" Hodge roared, seizing a fallen chain and whipping it toward the cultists. Elara drove her blade into the stone floor, scattering sparks as she advanced. With desperate ferocity, they broke the circle, cutting down the chanters before the ritual could finish. The chamber fell silent once more, save for their harsh breathing. Thomas trembled, torch still in hand. If this is what serves the Benefactor, then he is no mere schemer. He wields fear like a weapon, and perhaps worse. Elara retrieved the letters, her gauntlets slick with sweat. Then our task grows darker. We cannot fight this in alleys or taverns alone. We need truth strong enough to shatter lies. Hodge looked toward the endless tunnel stretching into black. His voice was low, resolute. Then into the dark we go. Better to hunt shadows than wait for them to consume us. They gathered their strength and pressed deeper into the catacombs, not knowing whether the path ahead led to salvation, or only deeper into the Benefactor's grasp. The air of Belleview seemed heavier than usual, as though the city itself had begun to sense the weight of conspiracies tightening around its heart. By the time Hodge, Thomas, and Elara left the dim confines of their safe house, the streets pulsed with whispers. Merchants leaned over their stalls with eyes darting toward the council hall. Guards patrolled in erratic clusters, and even the bells of St. Maro's tolled with a mournful rhythm. For the trio, each step forward felt like a trespass into hostile territory. Hodge moved with the careful precision of a man who had once trusted too deeply and been burned by betrayal. At 40, his weathered face bore the scars of battles fought both on the field and in shadowed corridors of power. His hand rested casually near the hilt of his dagger, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed his readiness to strike if necessary. Thomas, younger and still bearing the unpolished energy of 28, walked beside him with restless eyes. His auburn hair caught what little light broke through the overcast sky, and he chewed at the inside of his cheek as though it might help silence the doubts gnawing at his mind. Behind them, Elara moved like a phantom. At 35, her raven black hair framed sharp features, and her dark eyes carried the wisdom of one who had navigated both politics and danger. Her calm contrasted with the simmering unease of her companions, though even she could not ignore the shadows, gathering at the edges of their path. The trio's investigation had brought them to the council archives, a labyrinthine hall of records where dust and silence conspired to bury inconvenient truths. Rows of shelves towered like monuments to forgotten decrees, and the stale air smelled of parchment and mildew. Elara moved ahead, her gloved fingers trailing lightly along the edges of scrolls and tomes, as if she could divine their secrets through touch alone. Thomas unrolled a fragile charter, his brow furrowed as he traced lines of ink that spoke in veiled allegories of secret alliances. Hodge lingered near the doorway, eyes flickering between the documents and the corridor beyond, wary of footsteps that might approach at any moment. The discovery came in pieces, fragments of correspondence that together painted a picture too monstrous to ignore. Letters sealed with the sigil of a merchant's guild described shipments diverted to secret rendezvous points. Reports of guard deployments bore subtle alterations, small enough to evade notice yet significant enough to allow conspirators to move unhindered. And among the records of council votes, Elara uncovered a ledger marked with an unfamiliar symbol, an Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail. It was a mark of old sects, a reminder that the enemy had roots deeper than any of them had feared. As realization spread among them, so too did the weight of betrayal. The conspiracy was no longer confined to the shadows. It was entwined with the very body of Belleview's leadership. To accuse the council would be to accuse the city itself, and to remain silent was to allow the rot to consume it whole. Their whispers were interrupted by the scrape of boots against stone. Hodge's hand flew to his dagger as 3 guards emerged from the far end of the archive hall, torches casting long shadows across the chamber. The guards bore the insignia of the council, but their eyes gleamed with something colder than duty. Betrayal had reached even the city watch. One of the guards barked a demand for the trio to surrender. Thomas's pulse hammered in his ears. Elara's lips tightened into a line of grim resolve. Hodge answered not with words, but with steel drawn into the torchlight. The clash was swift and brutal. Hodge lunged first, his blade flashing as he parried a downward strike. Thomas, less seasoned but no less determined, wrestled a guard to the ground, the struggle sending parchment flying in a storm of dust. Elara moved with practiced grace, using her smaller frame to slip past a guard's guard and drive the hilt of her dagger against his temple. The hall echoed with the chaos of combat, steel against steel, ragged breaths, and the dull thud of bodies striking stone. When the last guard fell unconscious to the floor, the trio stood amidst the wreckage of toppled shelves and scattered records, the victory hollowed by the knowledge of what it meant. Their enemies were everywhere. With little time to spare, they gathered the incriminating documents and slipped through the archive's hidden passage, a narrow stairway spiraling down into darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and the flicker of their lone torch painted fleeting visions of cobwebs and damp stone. At the passage's end, they emerged into the catacombs beneath Belleview, where the bones of long-dead citizens rested in silence. Here, in the company of the forgotten, they allowed themselves a moment to breathe, but respite proved short. As they laid the documents across a broken altar to examine their findings, Elara's eyes hardened. "These symbols," she whispered, pointing to the Ouroboros etched beside certain names. "It is not just commerce and guards. They have infiltrated the council chambers themselves. Some among the ruling lords have already sworn to the serpent." Hodge's jaw clenched. "Then Bellevue is already theirs, unless we can tear the serpent from its nest." Thomas swallowed hard, his youthful face pale. "And if we fail?" No one answered, for the silence itself carried the truth. The chapter closed on the trio as they prepared to act. Above them, the city's surface life continued with its illusions of normalcy. But beneath that fragile veneer, the serpent coiled ever tighter. Their path was now a razor's edge. One misstep, and the serpent would devour them whole. Yet even in the face of such treachery, resolve kindled in their eyes. They would not abandon Bellevue to its fate. The true war had begun. The city of Bellevue, wrapped in an uneasy silence, was slowly being suffocated by invisible hands. The network of conspirators had not only extended its tendrils into commerce and law enforcement, but also into the very veins of the council chambers. Whispers of betrayal drifted like fog through the narrow alleys, slipping into taverns and across the desks of officials. Hodge, Thomas, and Elara found themselves caught between knowledge and paralysis. They knew too much, but proving it was another matter. Hodge had grown more severe in recent days. The shadows beneath his eyes deepened, the sharp lines of his face drawn tighter by the constant weight of vigilance. He felt the city itself was watching him, the cobblestones echoing every step he took as if recording his guilt. At 40, he bore the look of a man who had survived too many winters, his once broad shoulders hunched slightly from carrying burdens unseen by others. Thomas, restless and raw with energy, moved with the impatience of a caged predator. He prowled their rented rooms at night, staring out windows with dark eyes that flicked from torchlight to shadow. At 28, he was lean, his youthful vigor bruised by the things he had witnessed. His hands often trembled when he was still too long, though he tried to mask it with biting humor. Elara was their axis, her composure the rope that kept them from unraveling. At 35, with auburn hair pinned neatly back and sharp eyes that missed nothing, she embodied the calm of a seasoned strategist. She carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who had learned to survive in a world that delighted in testing her strength. Though outwardly composed, she too felt the noose tightening. Every message delivered through her network of informants hinted at betrayal growing closer. The trio gathered one evening in a candlelit chamber above a merchant's warehouse. The flame sputtered as if unwilling to bear witness. On the table lay maps, letters, and coded notes, their edges smudged by anxious fingers. Hodge pressed his palms flat against the wood and leaned over them. "We are no longer searching for shadows," he said, his voice low and grave. "The shadows have already found us," Thomas scoffed, though the sound lacked conviction. "So what do we do? Sit here and wait for them to knock on the door?" Elara's eyes cut to him, cool and precise. "We prepare, and we choose carefully who we trust because every step now will be tested." The words proved prophetic. Days later, an attempt was made on Hodge's life. He had walked through the council quarter when a cloaked figure lunged from the darkness, steel flashing. Reflex and survival hardened by years saved him, though not without a slash across his arm. He staggered back into the light, gripping his wound as the assailant melted into the night. Blood stained his sleeve, but more painful than the injury was the truth it revealed. They were marked, and the enemy was no longer content to hide. Fear did not weaken them. It steeled their resolve. Hodge's injury became a silent rallying cry, a visible reminder of the stakes. Elara pressed forward with her network, weaving a tapestry of spies and signals that reached deeper into Bellevue's underbelly. Thomas, with his relentless energy, hunted trails in taverns and along the docks, his sharp tongue coaxing whispers from reluctant lips. Yet treachery gnawed at them. Allies disappeared. A councilman who had once hinted at loyalty was found dead in the river, his eyes open to the night sky. A merchant's apprentice who carried their letters vanished, leaving only a satchel floating near the pier. The city itself seemed to close in, stone walls leaning, alleys narrowing, and windows glaring like watchful eyes. One night, Elara returned from a clandestine meeting with a message that chilled them. "There is a traitor within the council," she said, her voice stripped of its usual steadiness. "But worse, someone close to us has been compromised." The silence that followed was more suffocating than any outburst. Thomas's fist clenched. "Name them." Elara shook her head. "I don't know yet, but I will." The paranoia that followed seeped into every exchange. Every look carried weight, every silence suspicion. Hodge, though hardened, felt the poison of doubt creep into his thoughts. Thomas's restless pacing grew more violent, his humor sharper, bordering on cruel. Elara bore it all with a mask of calm, though beneath it her heart beat like a trapped bird. The climax of the chapter came in the council chambers themselves. The trio had secured a place in the gallery, hidden among other petitioners, as accusations erupted between council members. Voices rose, papers slammed, fingers pointed. It was not yet open war, but it was the thunder before the storm. Amid the chaos, Hodge spotted a familiar face among the councilors, one of their supposed allies, leaning close to a known conspirator, whispering with serpentine ease. The truth crystallized. Betrayal was not a threat to come, but a reality already unfolding. As the chamber dissolved into shouts and glares, Hodge, Thomas, and Elara slipped out, their minds ablaze. They had proof but no clear path forward. Belleview was a city teetering on the edge of its own undoing, and the trio stood in the very heart of the storm. Their bonds to each other, strained by suspicion and fear, were all that remained unbroken. Belleview no longer slept. The city pulsed with tension, every shadow alive with suspicion, every whisper a potential weapon. The trio, Hodge, Thomas, and Elara, moved like hunted creatures through streets that had once seemed familiar. The line between ally and enemy had blurred beyond recognition, and the city itself seemed to conspire against them. Hodge, though still strong, bore the visible toll of the struggle. At 40, with rugged features carved by hardship and a bandaged arm still healing from the alley attack, he carried himself with the weariness of a man forced into constant vigilance. His sharp eyes scanned every corner, every face. He trusted no one. Thomas was a storm barely contained. At 28, lean and wiry, his dark hair fell unruly across his pale face. His restlessness had sharpened into volatility. His words came in sudden bursts, his movements too quick, too sharp, like a blade always half-drawn. There was fire in his eyes, but also something brittle, as though the flames could consume him from within. Elara, the anchor, had begun to show cracks in her mask. At 35, auburn hair carefully pinned, her posture still regal, she carried herself with poise, but her gaze betrayed sleepless nights. Her eyes flicked constantly to doors, windows, shadows. She moved with purpose, but her hands, when clasped at rest, trembled ever so slightly. The chapter opened with the trio gathering in a disused chapel at the city's edge. Dust drifted through fractured stained glass, casting broken colors on the floor. They spoke in hushed tones, aware the walls themselves might have ears. Elara laid out intelligence she had received. The conspirators were planning something decisive, a strike not against the council but against the city itself. "They mean to shatter Belleview," she whispered, her voice taut. "And in the chaos, they will seize it whole." Hodge pressed his good arm to the table, the wood creaking beneath his weight. "Then we have little time. We need proof strong enough to rattle even those who doubt us." Thomas paced the ruined pews, his boots echoing. "And if proof is beyond reach? Do we wait until they burn the city down?" Their argument was cut short by a sound. Footsteps outside the chapel. The trio froze, exchanging a glance heavy with dread. For a moment, only silence. Then the door groaned and torchlight spilled in. A band of armed men entered, faces hidden beneath hoods. The ensuing clash was chaos. Thomas lunged first, quick and reckless, knocking one man back. Hodge followed, using his injured arm despite the pain, striking with brutal efficiency. Elara, though unarmed, moved with precision, distracting and tripping their attackers, buying precious seconds. In the flickering torchlight, the fight seemed like shadows colliding, violent and desperate. They barely escaped, slipping into the night with the taste of iron and smoke in their mouths. Afterward, the paranoia grew unbearable. The chapel had been compromised. No place was safe. They shifted from safe house to safe house, sleeping little, speaking less. Every knock at the door, every creak of wood above was a blade poised over their throats. One night, in a loft above a baker's shop, Elara confronted Hodge. Her voice was low but sharp. There is someone feeding them our movements. Someone too close. If we don't uncover them, we will not survive another week. Thomas, listening from the shadows, erupted. And what if it's one of us? What if the traitor is already here? His eyes burned as he looked between them. The words hung like poison in the air. Elara's face tightened, but she did not flinch. Hodge's jaw set like stone, though his silence spoke volumes. The strain on their bond became a wound in itself. Trust, once their strongest shield, now cracked. And Bellevue's conspirators exploited every fracture. Murders and disappearances multiplied. Rumors swept through taverns that the city guard had been bought in whole. By day, the council chambers dissolved into accusations. By night, the streets reeked of smoke and blood. The chapter reached its crescendo when the trio followed a lead into the catacombs beneath Belleview. The tunnels, damp and ancient, wound like veins beneath the city. There, by torchlight, they discovered the conspirators' meeting place. A vast chamber carved from stone, filled with sigils, maps, and crates of weapons. But they were not alone. Cloaked figures gathered in silence, and at their center stood a familiar face, a counselor they had once counted as an ally. His words slithered across the chamber. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The encounter did not end in combat, but in revelation. Proof, finally, but also despair. The conspiracy was larger, darker, more entrenched than they had ever feared. As they retreated through the twisting tunnels, the trio understood. The noose around Bellevue was not just tightening, it was already beginning to close. The night draped itself over Bellevue with deceptive tranquility. The lanterns along the cobbled streets flickered under the wind, casting uneven shadows that danced upon the stone facades. Hodge and Thomas moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the mist that had settled low across the ground. The document seized from the council chamber hinted at something far darker than greed, a conspiracy stretching its claws across the very heart of the city. Hodge's heart raced, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Every whispered rumor they chased, every coded letter they deciphered, drew them closer to an enemy that was no longer faceless. The web of betrayal had begun to take shape. Noblemen, merchants, and lawkeepers, all entangled in a scheme that thrived in the shadows. Inside a dimly lit tavern near the riverfront, Hodge leaned against the wall, watching Thomas speak with a reluctant informant. The man's hands trembled as he revealed names that should never have left his lips. A judge who had accepted bribes, a constable who turned a blind eye, a merchant who financed the darker dealings, all part of a single network. Each name was a dagger pointed at the fragile order of Bellevue. Thomas's voice remained steady, but his eyes betrayed his unease. "If this spreads unchecked," he whispered later to Hodge, "the city will devour itself. They won't need foreign enemies, the rot is already here." Hodge nodded grimly. His mind wandered to the faces of innocent citizens, the washerwomen, the street vendors, the apprentices whose only crime was to live under the council's rule. If the conspiracy succeeded, they would be crushed without ever knowing why. By dawn, their investigation led them to the manor of Councillor Winslow. The estate loomed like a fortress, its windows glowing faintly in the morning fog. The guards at the gate wore expressions too stern for mere watchmen. Something about the stillness unsettled Hodge. He exchanged a glance with Thomas, whose jaw tightened in recognition of the danger. They entered under the guise of messengers. Inside, the air reeked of opulence. Velvet drapes, silver trays untouched, and marble statues that seemed to mock their presence. Councillor Winslow awaited them in the grand hall, his smile polished yet venomous. "My friends," he greeted, though the word dripped with insincerity. "You tread dangerous ground. Dig too deeply and you may find yourselves buried." Hodge stepped forward, unflinching. "The people deserve to know who governs them, and how." For a brief moment, silence hung heavy in the hall. Then Winslow chuckled, as though amused by a child's defiance. "Truth is a luxury, Inspector. Stability requires sacrifice. Do you truly believe justice outweighs order?" Hodge's chest tightened, not from fear but fury. He saw in Winslow's calm demeanor the embodiment of every corrupted ideal they had uncovered. Yet he also understood the weight of the man's words. Order built on corruption was still order. To tear it down risked chaos. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of guards, their spears gleaming in the candlelight. Winslow's eyes betrayed satisfaction as he gestured lazily. "Escort them out. Make sure they remember their place." But Hodge was not so easily cowed. With a sharp motion, he and Thomas resisted, the hall erupting into a struggle of steel and shouts. The clash echoed through the manor, each strike a desperate bid to escape. Hodge's mind whirled with the knowledge that this was not merely survival. It was the preservation of the truth itself. They fled through hidden passages revealed by their informant, emerging into the cold dawn. Breathless and battered, Thomas leaned against a wall, blood staining his sleeve. Yet there was determination in his gaze. "We can't stop now. Winslow is only one head of the Hydra." Hodge clasped his friend's shoulder, his resolve unshaken. "Then we'll cut them all one by one." The city around them stirred with morning life, unaware of the shadows looming above. The conspirators tightened their grip, while Hodge and Thomas braced themselves for the battles yet to come. Belleview stood at the precipice, its fate teetering between salvation and ruin. The first light of dawn touched Belleview with deceptive gentleness, yet the city itself was taut with hidden tensions. Hodge could feel it in the streets, the wary glances of merchants, the whispers behind shutters, the soldiers marching with heavier steps than usual. Every corner seemed to breathe suspicion. The conspiracy had stretched its tendrils through every layer of society, and today would decide whether it tightened its grip or was severed for good. Hodge and Thomas walked side by side through the mist-veiled marketplace. Their coats were worn, stained from nights of struggle, but their posture betrayed unbroken resolve. Neither had slept, yet their eyes carried a fierce brightness. They had traced the final threads of betrayal, and all pointed to one chamber deep within the council's fortress. The fortress loomed ahead, an imposing structure of stone and iron, its towers clawing into the pale sky. Within those walls, the conspirators would convene under the guise of council business. But Hodge knew it was more than politics. It was the crucible in which Belleview's fate would be decided. Inside, the council chamber was already filled. The grand table stretched beneath a chandelier of crystal, its glitter mocking the gravity of the moment. Winslow sat among his allies, their faces masks of civility hiding venom. Documents lay neatly before them, seals unbroken, yet promises already sworn in secret. Hodge and Thomas entered, their presence drawing sharp stares. For a moment, silence ruled. Then Winslow's voice, smooth as velvet, filled the air. "You come uninvited, Inspector. Do you intend to lecture the council on morality again?" Hodge stepped forward, the chamber echoing with his boots. His voice carried not only defiance but finality. "No. Today I reveal the truth." Gasps rippled as he placed the seized documents upon the table. One by one, he recited names, dates, and deeds. The bribes, the betrayals, the secret dealings with foreign agents. His words cut through the chamber like a blade. Faces paled, fists clenched, and whispers rose like a storm. Thomas moved among the council, reading their expressions. Some showed shame, others only hardened resolve. Winslow sat unmoving, a faint smile still curling his lips. "Do you believe truth alone will topple power, Inspector? This city thrives not on purity, but on obedience." Before Hodge could reply, guards stormed the chamber. Steel clashed as Thomas drew his blade, holding them at bay while Hodge continued his accusation. The chandelier above swayed with the vibrations of chaos. The chamber became a battlefield, not of armies, but of wills. Hodge's voice rose above the clamor. "This city belongs not to conspirators nor to tyrants, it belongs to its people." The words struck like a hammer. Councilors wavered, guards hesitated. Some among them, weary of corruption, began to falter in their loyalty. In that moment, Hodge saw the fragile thread of hope, thin, yet unbreakable if grasped tightly enough. The struggle reached its crescendo when Winslow, furious at losing control, lunged for a dagger hidden within his robes. His mask of civility shattered into raw hatred. But before he could strike, Thomas seized his arm, forcing the weapon to clatter upon the marble floor. The silence that followed was heavier than any clash of steel. The councilors looked upon Winslow, their leader unmasked as nothing more than a desperate man. The illusion of authority fractured. Hodge's voice, steady yet weary, filled the chamber one last time. "Let this end here, not with blood, but with truth." For the first time, Winslow was left without words. The chamber erupted not in violence, but in surrender. Guards laid down their arms, councilors lowered their heads. The conspiracy, vast and insidious, crumbled under the weight of its own exposure. When Hodge and Thomas stepped outside, Bellevue was bathed in the full glow of morning. The bells of the city rang not for celebration, but for reckoning. The streets filled with people, their faces searching, uncertain of what the day meant. But for Hodge, standing amid the fog and light, it was enough to know that the truth had been spoken, and the city had been given a chance to breathe freely again. Yet even as hope glimmered, He understood the road ahead would not be easy. Corruption left scars deeper than stone. But Bellevue had faced the heart of treachery and had not surrendered. That for now was victory.